What are you tempted by? Sometimes I have frustrating days that just don't go as I want. I don't get accomplished what I want. I go home tired and think of me like a cranky baby. So what I do is I relax on the sofa and I think of, well, one chocolate chip cookie will help. But for me, there's no such thing as eating one chocolate cookie. So I go back, I get another two. And then Sigrid is looking, and I'm hiding a little bit. I'm going for the rest of the box. By that time, I feel so bad, and too much sugar feels just bad in my body. So I'm going for an IPA, and I love the Trogs 85 international bitter units because that helps counterbalance all the chocolate cookies. So I get one beer. That's pretty good, but I go back for a second one. And then Sigrid keeps track, and she says, that's it. And I do, and sometimes I went back for the third one, and then next day I have a hangover, so 2 is okay. So I've been there, and it's not pretty. And it just feels awkward and awful to be there. So what are you tempted by? When are your defenses, your ego, strength, and all a little bit lower than you seem to slip away from the straight and narrow? And some people think like, well, I'm never tempted. And I think like, well, let's think again. Let's take a look at it. Like, do you always say the truth and the whole truth? Because sometimes I say things to Sigrid and I don't say everything. I let her believe some things that I did not say. So it's kind of, okay, so there is temptation. How do I come across? Or have you ever talked about someone behind their back and labeled them or put them in a corner in whatever way? Or you got back $20 change. Did you really every time go back to give it to the cashier? That's what we think we would do always. Maybe you pulled in or out of a parking lot and you just touched the bumper of the car in the back a little bit. You scratched it a little bit. You get out of the car, you look around, no one is there, and, well, it's a minor thing, and you just keep going. Or maybe you're not all that full and true and honest about a test. It's time for me to confess, my friends. My dad wrote a paper for me in seminary. Can you believe that? Crazy. Really? Now, I could have done with his name, Dietmar Plyer, too. I submitted it, but that doesn't fly. Doesn't fly, does it? So there are temptations, I think, and when we're honest, for each and every one of us, whether it's booze or drug or porn or gambling, or when you're angry, over angry, whether you may walk on eggshells, always trying to keep the peace. That is not good for you either. Or when you apologize all the time and own and hold all of that for you, it's that you are alive is not your own fault. You are alive, you need your space. You don't have to apologize all the time. Or when you feel like a failure, when you feel like you're not living up to others, or when you're in an abusive relationship and doesn't need to be physical, but where you say at some point you gotta put your foot down and see what is healthy for you or for others too. So I think we all know we struggle and we face temptations. That's the first thing I want to lift up. And then when we look very specifically at our two scripture readings, let's take a look at Genesis 1. Adam, Eve in the garden of harmony and delight. It's just everything is beautiful. But there's this one tree, the knowledge of good and evil, they're not to take from. Now, when we think in our lives, our wholeness, our paradise was when we were children, totally innocent. We did not know and did not have to care about anything. But then sometimes something happens and some things break. Imagine 3 siblings. They're in the living room, mom and dad are there, and they're playing, and they have this small little tiger plush stuffed animal. And the older kids pull it away from the 2-year-old. And then the older sibling throws it to the other one. And the little one hobbles to one. And the other one hobbles back, so they play this monkey in the middle. And there is this beautiful vase on the mantle. Has been passed down from great-grandmother to grandmother to mother. And mother goes into the kitchen, and before she goes, she says, well, be careful, kids. Stop throwing that tiger. Mom leaves. They miss. Shards all around. Something of the innocence, something of this doing a thing you were not to do breaks open this paradise, this garden of delight and of harmony, and we all know that brokenness in us. And then what does Adam do when God asks him? He says, blame game. It started in the beginning. And don't we all know how that goes? Let's look at the Matthew 4 passage. Jesus, he just came out from the baptism, being affirmed, being encouraged, being loved to the zillions. Just, you are my beloved. That's what God says. You belong to me. You're the apple of my eye. I'm delighted, I'm pleased in you. Well, that's often how movies end with happy endings. Everything is okay. Everything, paradise. Well, reality is not like that, not even for Jesus. He's being tested or going into the wilderness. The Spirit guides him there. And then he's hungering, he's fasting. And then the tempter, the evil one, the snake, whatever you want to call the embodiment of temptation there, is getting to him and asking first, turn these stones into bread. And I think sometimes in me that is like, usually my bodies or our bodies are well nurtured. We're pretty good fed. We have enough to eat, don't we? Sometimes a little bit too much. So where and how are our souls and our spirits fed? Do we take care of our souls, of our spirits, of our inner beings, the child of God in us, as well as we take care of our bodies? Second question, when the tempter takes him to the pinnacle of the temple and asks, jump. Question for me is, what is orientation? What do we do? Do we want to impress people? Do we do things to get the accolades, the applause? Do we do things to receive appreciation? Do we do things to keep up the appearances? To keep up a nice front? To look good? What are the motivations there? And then the tempter, devil, Satan, whatever the name is, shows Jesus all the treasures of the world and says, it's all gonna be yours as long as you worship me. My question is then, what comes first in our lives? What has the top priority? What is the most important thing? Is it stuff? Is it power? Is it wanting to be loved? What comes first and foremost? For Jesus says, you may win the whole world, but you may lose your soul over it. So an invitation to have our priorities straight. Where and how does God come first? And how does that find expression in our lives? For us to gather for worship, for us to focus on prayer, for us to live in a healthy and a fulfilled relationship with God, with our neighbors, with ourselves too, and with creation overall. Now, how do you deal with temptations? Because we're all going to be tempted. We all face challenges. We all experience brokenness and evil. So I think the first one is to become aware of it, just paying attention and knowing, oh, okay, this is a temptation. So just becoming aware of it. That's the story of Augustine and the nest on your head. You don't build a nest. You can watch it come, you can watch it go, and you don't have to be triggered or buy into it. And I appreciate Joe. Joe showed me one time during Loaves and Fishes, quite a while ago. Joe had a lovely cookie, one of those sweet chocolate chip cookies. And Joe went back for a second cookie, and he looked at it, and he stopped, and he said, and I heard him, I don't need that cookie. Whoa, I don't need it. I don't need everything I want or I can get. I don't need it. So to recognize that, I'm okay. It doesn't mean I don't have the desire or I would want to eat it or get it or take 3 others in my pocket or so on. Just fill up. But just recognizing I don't need it. I'll be okay, even if I know the craving is in me. Second part is to go back and be grounded in prayer, and that is the self-awareness too, to connect with a deeper level, connect our longing with the living God, and recognizing that my longing, my hunger, there is something in me that this food cannot fill. There is something in me that food cannot satisfy, but only the love, the grace of God. And where Jesus in the garden even reminds his followers, Peter, James, and John, and says, be awake, watch and pray that you may not fall into temptation. So be awake, be aware where you're tempted. Then there is something about temptations and when we slip and when we slide, to just open up and fess up and recognize, I need help with this. So kind of bringing it up to the light of day and saying, this is more than I can deal with on my own. And a lot about dealing with addictions and temptations in that way. It's the only way, just having confidants, having accountability partners, dealing with groups, support groups, and so on to get from that out. And often it's kind of changing your friends, changing your environment, because it's often connected with. If you hang out with the same guys who drink, you feel like hooked and it's not good for you. You probably change company too, as a community, as a trusting new environment that will help you. And in that trusting place, you can grow and deal with the struggles too. So, by what are you tempted? And I know everyone is tempted in one way or another, are we not? Let's be honest. And how do we deal together with it? I think it takes a lot of grace to deal with it.